I think one of the things you glossed over, which I think would be very interesting to kind of explore more, is if, we don't get this under control, I believe that we become a lot less friendly. If we kind of extrapolate that, most of the wars that have been fought have been over resources. And if your country doesn't have enough resources or enough food, the one thing that we've done since time immemorial is we go and we take it. And so I think it's incredibly important to kind of think about that. That's something that I feel like the movement doesn't talk about a lot, is like, if we don't figure it out and get a little bit better, there's going to be a lot more global strife and conflict, a lot more wars, and that's never good. And especially if you look at today, the way the world sits, like a lot of people have forgotten this, but I don't think I don't think that there'll be a nuclear war, but like, especially with the increased hostilities in Europe, that we're in danger, right? There's a lot of peril right now. We have a conflict between the West and the East along the likes of which we haven't seen since the 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s. Like, it's definitely not so good, and that would pretty much be the doom of all of us. So I think it's definitely important that we do develop these technologies so you don't have to be so dependent on these nations.
Very, very, very much. And exactly, like, good point, because what I said before was kind of the polarization within countries. But of course, like, there is already a paradigm shift going on for how policy making goes beyond countries, because I would say it's not even a conflict only between East and West anymore, but a multipolar world where we have now the conflict with Russia, but I mean, look at China. We don't know what that's going to lead to, and I think that this instability is actually dangerous. Like, I don't believe in a nuclear war myself as well, but if we come into this time where we are actually faced with scarce resources, and countries want to get what they think they need, then the tensions will rise, and this kind of there's this political scientist Fukuyama who said, like, 20 years ago, the end of history, like, the Western liberal model of democracies will win. I'm not so sure. I mean, we don't know, because we are faced now with a situation where China, which is an autocracy, not a democracy, is highly functional in that sense, right? I mean, it's not like you could say back then in the USSR. Of course, they were the poor; they had no productivity. It was clear that this system would come to an end one day. Now we actually do have a competition of different governance models, and yeah,
That's a good point. And I like to stay here because this is something I find very, very interesting. If you look at what Xi Jinping's doing, there's a lot of environmental initiatives that China's doing to clean up and to get sustainable, but also there's a stark difference in the way these countries, like, both systems work. You have one country, the Chinese, right? They are ran by essentially engineers and scientists. They really do listen. And then, I don't know, I can't speak so much about the German political, but in the United States, we're governed by lawyers. we're governed by lawyers, so it's really hard to get things done. And if you look at the production numbers of China, they're we're still beating them a little bit, but I don't know how much longer we will be the world's largest economy. And I don't know, I don't know what the future looks like, because there's a lot of, and I'm getting way in the weeds here, but there's a lot of right now, I don't know if you would know this, but we are blocking their access to a lot of technologies. We're quietly sanctioning them. And the most interesting thing that I've seen is we're now forcing European countries to stop doing business with them. How long that is able to last, I don't know. But I don't know. And that's another thing is, there's a lot of contracts being rewarded because we've been behind them for probably about the last 20, 30 years in the development of Africa. They're way ahead. way ahead of us. Very forward-thinking society, you know.
Also,
and that's
just announced, I believe, within the last week that the ban on the sale and import of Chinese or something. It's like some restrictions on Chinese imports of conductor chips
yes.
for computers and things, and we have no manufacturing capacity at all. There's been investment. I think it was Intel is building like a $15 billion factory in Ohio.
Yes.
And I believe AMD is building something as well in California or somewhere in the United States. But those plants are still 15 to 20 years away from reaching the kind of capacity that we would need to be able to sustain any kind of development.
Yeah, and yeah, it's interesting. Like, first of all, also Germany is governed by lawyers. If you look at the Bundestag and the parliament, it is mostly lawyers there, which is also an issue in terms of representation. But yeah, it is an interesting time, because I feel like the certain paradigms are just crashing at the moment. We always had the belief that more globalization is leading to we always just have the advantages in certain countries and have chip production. 20 years ago, there would not have been this quiet ban, and now there is a tendency to localize certain things even more and go back. And at the same time, China is, of course, expanding also its political reach. Look at the Belt and Road Initiative. No, what is it called? Belt and Road. So there is like a tendency that the political power games increase, and I have no idea what this leads to. I
don't either.
It's an interesting time.
I don't either, and this is what's so fascinating to me, because I'm looking at the geopolitical landscape, and I'm like, are we at the beginning of? Are we in, I don't know, the 1936, 1937 right now, where everyone's incredibly hostile, everyone's quietly making moves? China's really trying to facilitate their soft power and their reach. I don't know. I don't know, and it's not something that we're not paying attention over here, man. We're definitely not. But it's all tied to certain things, right? It really is tied to the environment. A lot of the dispute in the waters between Japan and China have to do with fishing rights, right? Like, everything is boiled down to resources, which I think your book has done a good job of making sure that that's present. And there's also an issue with like soil degradation, like we're fucking the soil up, and there's so many issues, and there's so much to pay attention to, and it's really hard to figure out what's the most important thing, man. There's so much. There's so many things that are grabbing our attention. Most people are concerned about what's trending on Twitter or friggin' Instagram or whatever, but there's really, really important issues that are being discussed. And I don't know about you, but the thing that scares me is they're being discussed and decisions are being made by people that don't necessarily understand the science behind, these things.
No, that I would agree with, and I mean the general, like what people call now kind of polycrisis, all these different crises coming together, and then that's again coming back to this Club of Rome attempt to have a systemic view and not focus on particular issues only, but see, like, if you zoom out, what can you see then? Although even with that view, I have to say I'm a bit lost when I look at the international level at the moment, because I think it is really unstable, unpredictable, and not clear what's going to happen. So I think what we can do is kind of focus on the positive outcomes and say, like, look, these turnarounds we describe, we think these are also contributing to a more global, secure space, and that this is a positive contribution. But we, of course, don't have any predictions in that.
No.
And yeah.
What I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on nuclear energy?
Yeah, I think it's a contested topic for the reason, I think probably if 30 years ago the climate change would have been taken as serious as it's being taken now, we would still have nuclear, and instead of coal, we would have phased out coal before nuclear. So I think that in that sense, if you look at emissions, then coal is really harmful, and we have to know that. So that is an issue, and then I think it really depends on the country level. Like, following the German discourse, I think it really doesn't make much sense at the moment anymore. We have like three 3 nuclear power plants. Building these things takes forever. You need massive investment. The state actually has to take over the insurance. And there are, of course, these negative externalities, like the stuff like what you put. It's kind of scary to have something where you don't have to store it for 100,000 years. I feel like, that's not the most sustainable way of doing it. But of different bad alternatives, I understand that this is an alternative some people recognize. And I think moving forward, though, also looking at the price decline and what we discussed before, I think it just won't make sense anymore in the future. Because I think that solar, wind, all these things will have a price advantage even. Yeah.